And our meeting tonight is now open for sharing testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Janet from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Florence, for the beautiful reading. Over the years, I've had many proof of God's love and protection, and I'm so grateful for them all. Years ago, when my husband and I were newly married, money was tight. We were in a recession, which caused my husband to close his business. Even though I had a job, we were struggling financially. I prayed about this, and my husband was able to find temporary jobs and had a few interviews, but there was no permanent position and no response from the interviews. I continued praying by knowing that God does meet our needs, and He never leaves us wanting, for love knows what we need. My husband suggested we leave Florida and go to his hometown in Georgia. He said we could live with his family while he looked for a job there. I didn't know what God's plan for us was, but I felt very sure that moving in with family in another state was not the plan. But I also knew it was right to go along with my husband's request. So I gave 2 weeks' notice to my employer. All this time, I was trusting completely in God. 2 days later, after I gave my notice, my husband received an offer from a national company for a position in the city where we lived. He accepted the position, and we didn't have to move. I told my employer what happened and asked if I could stay on, and they said, of course. While this experience was stressful at times and lasted quite a few months, I never stopped trusting that God's will would be done. On page 167 of Science and Health, Mary Baker Eddy states, quote, "Only through radical reliance on truth can scientific healing power be realized," unquote. I'm so grateful for this experience. I'm very grateful for this service tonight, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Linda from Ohio, go ahead.
3 weeks ago, my college-age daughter, who is not a Christian Scientist, arrived home early from a date, reporting that her stomach hurt quite badly. Throughout the evening, she couldn't find any comfortable position, and the pain and symptoms seemed to intensify. I prayed throughout the night, but by morning, she had decided that she needed medical attention, which I respected. And after arriving at the ER, I requested support from practitioner at Plainfield to help with my fear for my daughter's condition, as well as fear for the current virus and its association with hospitals. Not long after arriving, an ER doctor said that she was being admitted for 2 days. They made dire predictions that tests suggested she had Crohn's disease due to a CAT scan. Practitioners suggested that I focus on radiating, not absorbing the errors that were being presented. She suggested I reread the article, Radiation and Absorption by A. Lerner. It's on the Plainfield website. Lerner writes, "Am I radiating good or am I absorbing evil?" This was an easy task for me to concentrate on as medical personnel kept coming in and out with various interruptions. So I kept it simple and I strived to radiate God's qualities. Not long after, Kayla's pain was eliminated and she took no more pain medication after about 6 that evening and remained pain-free. By morning, she was itching to leave, yet the doctors were not on board. They insisted that although we insisted we needed to be home, they did finally agree to it with a follow-up colonoscopy within the next 2 weeks. So Kayla remained pain-free after we arrived home, and I'm happy to say that when she went for that doctor-driven colonoscopy the past week, there was nothing negative to be seen. The doctor said he no longer suspected any disease, and Although he didn't know what caused it, there was nothing there now. I realized then that the healing had come within those first few hours under practitioner support. Kayla's origin was never in matter. Her being is derived directly from God as His image and likeness. The dramatic and quick changes were evidence of God's care for us. I am just so grateful for the support of loving practitioners at Plainfield. These past weeks, it's been so nice to share supportive articles from the website with friends of mine. One said that he had shared the wonderful things are happening with Dorothy B. Riker with his family, and they all agreed that it was such a great article and marveled how they had never read articles like that before in their mainstream CS church. What a positive affirmation to Plainfield. Thank you all, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Dale from Virginia, go ahead.
Yes, I am just very grateful for this church and for my practitioner. I've just come through a really rough, more than 2.5 weeks, which I believe is that crazy virus. And it's the loving support and the inspiration that's gotten me through it. And I just had to express my gratitude.
Thank you. Dede from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. This week, Monday, when I logged into work, I was immediately tasked with a special project to make calls to several customers to provide information concerning one of our employees who had found himself ill after providing service for them. The calls were considered difficult to make due to the sensitive information being shared, and my 2 coworkers and I were advised that we were carefully selected to assist. We were given a script to go over before we began calling, and as I began to read over it, the thought came to me that proper preparation doesn't only come through practice, but through prayer. I started to talk to God, asking that He be with me, and that those who I would speak to would hear His voice and feel His love. The calls took 3 days to complete, and the project was successful overall. On my last of about 45 calls, the customer expressed sincere concern for the employee who had become ill, rather than only worrying about himself or his family. And to me, that was the best part of the whole experience. I'm so grateful to know that when facing what could be a fearful situation, I can always best prepare by approaching it with loving understanding of God's presence and protection for me and all. Thank you so much, Florence, for tonight's readings, and thank you all for the testimonies given so far. I'm very grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Joanne from Florida, go ahead.
Thank you. Those readings were absolutely beautiful, Florence. Thank you. The other day I was having a hard time keeping my joy when I remembered a line from the Bible in a Max Dunaway poem our teacher Doris Evans had read to us. Quote, "Hitherto hath the Lord helped us, and henceforth shall He too." End quote. So I did what I've been taught here and started to count my blessings, remembering all the ways God has helped me in the past. I remembered a time when I had to travel on business from New Jersey to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, for the day, taking an early morning flight and returning home late afternoon that same day. It was a Wednesday, and this flight schedule enabled me to be back home for our church service that evening. When I got to the Winston-Salem airport about 4 p.m. to check in for my flight, it was announced that all the flights leaving the airport were canceled because of an approaching storm. The last flight allowed out to Newark Airport was boarding at a distant gate, so I ran to it to try to get a seat. When I got to that gate, the flight attendant was closing the door and said, "Sorry, but it's full," and getting ready to take off. I walked away, not knowing what I was going to do. I had no place to stay overnight, no lesson books with me, not even a toothbrush with me. I sat in the airport lobby and calmed myself down, recalling that the practitioner was praying for me during this trip and knew that God would have me in my right place. Just then, I looked up and saw that same flight attendant walking quickly toward me and waving me to get up and follow her. She led me back to the gate of that only departing flight and quickly ushered me onto the plane. It was a safe, on-time flight, and I got home in time for our church service. Hitherto hath the Lord helped us, and henceforth will he too. I am so grateful for all the practitioner help I have received in this church. I'm grateful to Mrs. Eddy for giving us this precious Christian Science, and I'm grateful for God's ever-present, unfailing help. I'm so glad to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Ingrid from California, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for the beautiful readings. I have to express my gratitude for all the amazing work that you all do, for that amazing website. It's been so wonderful to be able to have so much help and support, especially for the work here in Los Angeles with the homeless, which is gotten more difficult to do, of course, and especially because the community talks about like if it was a problem with the homeless and not a so-called health problem. And so it's just more aggressive towards them. And it's been really wonderful to be able to listen to all Bible lessons because they are all on the website. It's just amazing source of everything good. And sometimes on my laptop, there's 6 and 7 windows only with that website because I want to come back to this one and that one. That's so wonderful that it is. And thank you so much for being so dedicated, and especially for everything about the animal magnetism, which I respectfully call unreal magnetism, and it helps me to remember that it's unreal. Thank you so much for all the blessings.
Thank you. Elizabeth from Georgia, go ahead.
I've been taking long walks with my dogs in our local park. And yesterday, after walking with them, I got in the car and one of my hands became very itchy. And I realized I'd dropped the leash in some plants along the path. I hadn't really paid much attention to what it fell into, but everything is blooming down here in the south, and there is a lot of poison ivy along the path. And at first I thought, oh no, I don't need this now. And then I thought, no, I don't have to accept this, and I won't. I exist in the atmosphere of love divine where I live and move and breathe. And that is a hymn. And the next thought that came was, a spiritual idea has not a single element of error, and this truth removes properly whatever is offensive. I had dropped the dogs off at home, and I headed to the store because I needed to get a few items. And I sat in the car just a few moments to acknowledge those truths. And then I walked in. And by the time I was done, about 25 minutes later, there was no itchiness or redness on my hands. I'm just grateful for that. And thank you for the readings on love tonight.
Thank you. Okay, someone's calling from area code 479 531. Please announce yourself and go ahead with your testimony.
Hi, my name's Kari, and I was reading the lesson this week titled Unreality, and there were some passages in the responsive reading that really stood out to me, and I found a lot of inspiration, and I've never really thought of them this way before. And it's Psalms 91, line 3, and it says, "Surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence." And the first word stood out to me, surely. It says, he delivered thee. It doesn't say, well, maybe he'll deliver thee, or sometimes he'll deliver thee. It says, surely. I thought that was really inspirational. And then a little bit farther down in the responsive reading, Psalms 91, 9, it says, "Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation." And I thought, well, where do I habitate? Well, my habitation is in God, for we live and move and have our being in Him. And that's true about me, and that's true about my family, and that's true about my community. That's true about the leaders of our nation and the world. And I'm so very grateful for your lesson and for the inspiration this week. Thank you.
Thank you. Benjamin.
Yeah, I'm very grateful to be here tonight and to hear the wonderful testimonies of what God is doing in our life. These past few weeks, like everybody is experiencing, I just want to use this opportunity to thank God for what He's doing, even though it hasn't been acknowledged publicly. There's a lot of focus on things that doesn't really exalt God at all. But in all this storm, the noise, the pestilence, God hasn't changed. God hasn't changed from caring for His people, providing for His people's need, and of course protecting us. I hope we don't forget that God hasn't changed. He's God, the same God yesterday, today, and forever, and He will deliver thee, like the previous testifier mentioned. When I first came to this church, one of the lessons that I learned, our teacher always, remind us, was never follow the crowd. Whatever the news may be, always ask God, what do you want me to do? And when you listen, He will guide you and show you the direction to go. Usually, His direction always leads us to safety. Like I say, no matter what the news or noise may be. One of the examples was about, if you live here in New Jersey, you probably experience some chaos when it comes to finding some necessities like food or some basic needs like cleaning supplies. Some people have gone over the board, some buying things they don't even need, making life difficult for other people. But I always pray before I leave the house because I didn't want to change. Because of that, I didn't want to change the way I live my life, which is the way God wants me to live it. Whenever I go to the store, since all this has been going on, I always feel like nothing is going on. The store always filled up. It's like the normal day, the normal weekend. And if you're inside those stores that I go, you feel like nothing actually going on outside. But because of I was listening to God, and He let me go out the right time that I was supposed to go out. And I find everything that I always find. They're always there. There's no single thing that I was looking for that I haven't found. Like I said, I haven't changed the way I live my life or the way I do my shopping around because I was listening to God. It's important to listen to God in this time. And never forget that God is still God. He hasn't changed. He's still caring for His people. No matter what the news media is talking about, God hasn't changed and He will never change. He will deliver us. He will care for us and He will provide for us. I'm so grateful to be here tonight. I'm so grateful for what God is doing here. I'm glad we have our church today. Some other churches have closed, but we're here tonight, praising God. I'm very happy to be here tonight.
Thank you.
Pam, and I am so grateful for a healing that I had several weeks ago. I had brought a bird feeder into my kitchen, and I was filling it with seed, and all of a sudden I felt a very sharp pain in my finger and thought that I must have gotten a insect bite. And in examining the top of the feeder, I saw a wasp crawling around, and immediately took the feeder outside, and my husband was in the driveway, and I said, "You need to kill this bee. It just stung me." And he said, "Well, it's probably going to die because it had already stung you." And I realized immediately that my thinking was all wrong. I said, "Father, what do you know about this situation?" And the thought immediately came to me that nowhere in God's kingdom could one idea harm another. That little bee was trying to protect himself, not trying to harm me, so he shouldn't be punished with the thought of death. I went back inside to the kitchen and applied a baking soda solution and then washed that off in a short while and continued to work through the evening with truths that I had been given and working for myself, and I refused to examine my finger. I also worked at loving that little bee. The next morning, there was absolutely no trace of a sting, no swelling, no mark, nothing on the finger. I am so grateful for the truths that we learn in Christian Science and that we can use them for any situation. I even took it a step further and looked up on Google the value of wasps, and it turns out that they are very valuable to the ecosystem. I am so grateful to be here this evening. And thank you, Florence, for your readings. And thank you for all the testimonies that will be given this evening. I'm very grateful to be here. Good evening.
Thank you. Dave from Florida, go ahead.
Okay, one more time. Thank you very much for those readings, Florence. They were excellent. As I was saying, I've discovered that Christian Science can heal both personal and business relationships. Recently, I had an incident with the president of one of our other associations. She's very contentious, opinionated, and not well liked, and we were locking horns a lot. So I asked a practitioner here for help and was told to work with a statement from Science and Health: truth removes properly whatever is offensive, and to know also that God is in control. Well, I worked with that, as well as knowing that either the error goes or she goes. I was also told to drop any thoughts of hatred toward her and just see her right. So to make a long story short, after several months of doing this, it's now entirely healed. We're getting along great. There's no more contention. And this was no small thing. I'm grateful to know that we can apply the healing truth of Christian Science to anything in our daily lives, and it works. I'm grateful to be a member here and for the work of the practitioner. Thank you.
Thank you. Craig.
Thank you, Florence, for those really important readings. And we are our brother's keeper. And during his time, when he was gratitude, because we've been prepared for serving mankind and the world. I've been working with the 91st Psalm that we've been directed, and it reminded me of what I was taught years ago. Often when I had trouble, practitioner teacher would tell me, stay in the love of God and then I'll work for you. I thought about the love of God, and over time I realized the love of God is that God loves us so much, and that each one, if we stay in that consciousness of the love that God has for us, and that nothing but what His plan can come upon us, we are immovable, we are safe, we will see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we will have our victory. So I've been working and praying, but it's a long period, and I asked God to show me a sign that I was effective. Well, next day I went to a CVS store, and as I waited there to be helped, a man smiled at me and said, I sense a godly spirit in you. Well, I was kind of surprised, but then I said, God heard my prayer. And we talked about God's care for man these days. And and as he left, he said, certainly, God loves us and has always done so. And it made me feel that He's getting it. He's getting our work of our prayers. He's being uplifted. And when he left, I said, I know, you're in the Spirit right now. And if He's in the Spirit right now, as much work as we do, there are many, and there'll be more in the Spirit. So the work must continue, and I lost any sense of possible that I wasn't working right, and that we were doing a good and helpful thing. I thank God for Mary Baker Eddy and our dear, caring, kind God that tends for us always.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to learn through Christian Science that the best way to love anyone is not to see them as a mortal personality. I must say, over the years, this has not been easy, but it's a worthwhile practice, because when I look at everything that comes to us that we're able to overcome, it's because of some understanding of our spirituality, our oneness with God as God's image and likeness. And that is how we are able to separate the lies from what mortal mind is trying to convince us as what we are. Today's readings, I was pleased to see this. Mrs. Eddy says that in some way, sooner or later, all must rise superior to materiality, and suffering is oft the divine agent in this elevation. All things work together for good to them that love God, is the dictum of Scripture. I was surprised to see that. I don't think I've really paid attention ever to that. But what a time, it's the essence of it is so appropriate at this time. It's wonderful to hear people say that the world, we must all love each other. We must learn to love more. And part of that section from Jesus telling the people about caring for each other, that he was in prison and someone came and so on, is that daily practice of kindness for one another. But as I said, I have learned now the most we can do is to try to pray for others with this understanding. And I'm so grateful that Mrs. Eddy never gives us instruction without how to do it. I find that the scientific statement of being on page 468 of Science and Health clearly gives us how we can love ourselves and love everybody else in the right way, uplifting everyone from this sense of material being and all the false beliefs that we can be subject to when we see ourselves so incorrectly like this. It's making me appreciate it so much, the scientific statement of being, and I will read it for those who have never come across it. On page 468 of Science and Health, it says, question, what is the scientific statement of being? Answer, there is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. All is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation, for God is all in all. Spirit is immortal truth, matter is mortal error. Spirit is the real and eternal, matter is the unreal and temporal. Spirit is God, and man is his image and likeness. Therefore, man is not material, he is spiritual. I'm so grateful to Mary Baker Eddy for this, because this is really what helps us love our neighbor as ourselves. He gave this to us, I believe in now, more than ever, so that we can see ourselves correctly and love others the same way, the way God sees us. And this is the perfect way of loving ourselves and the whole of mankind. So grateful for all the testimonies and for all the right thought that came in tonight to support the meeting. Grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
Thank God for all that is offered in the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, which encourages us to remain in constant prayer so that when we are faced with common challenges, we can aid in calming the fears of others through our unwavering confidence in God. This is what is helping us to best help each other. And Florida, thank you so much for the Bible study session this morning and for everyone who participated. It was so good to be together with you all, and God bless you all. In Pennsylvania, the 91st Psalm, in the first person with a scientific interpretation attributed by Mary Baker Eddy, is about as good as it gets. Thank you for sharing this treasure. I hope everyone sees it. And it is on our bulletin. It is on our website. And then we have a letter here from California. Hello, dear Plainfielders. Especially recently, I have been inspired to really put into practice what I already know to be true, to ward off that red dragon-powered MAM, malicious animal magnetism. I find myself falling in love with God more and more as I remember to put God first, spending most of the days living what I am learning. So very important right now to hold everyone in good thought and good consciousness, as you well know. And this is all thanks to you and God because of the really great, flawless website. I have printed articles, laying them around the house, and I go through my days listening to all the audio on YouTube. The readings of the early workers are expressed so beautifully, and they seem to come into consciousness, not through the physical ear, but are a direct message of spiritual understanding, because the thoughts and articles are so perfectly understood by the readers. Amazing what love is given through them, and the testimonies and the round tables. The 91st Psalm, especially Doris Evans' spiritual interpretation, has become a constant companion for a couple of years now. So I am so busy being surrounded by all of this divine truth and its love that worry, fear, don't have much time to creep into thought. Sorry, Mr. Red Dragon, we win. Yay. and I feel marvelous. Aside from that, I listen to audio recordings of beautiful bird songs on YouTube instead of the dreary, anxiety-ridden news. What would Mary Baker Eddy think of all this drama? Enclosed find the subscription, renewal, and donation, as well as a few of my homemade bookmarks that help keep thought lifted in light for me and for others. The one, Be at Peace and Rest in My Love, has been my go-to, the still small voice of God, speaking lovingly and silently to me over the years. It heals. Love to you all. And that was California. She sent a very beautiful card as well. Thank you for that beautiful reading tonight. What a lovely benediction on us all to remember the most important thing there is. As Henry Drummond says, the greatest thing in the world is to love. And love heals anything and everything. And when there is love, there is light. And where there is light, the darkness cannot come. And so it was mentioned tonight about an article, Radiation versus Absorption. We believe it was written by Mrs. Eddy. And anyway, it has been a source of great comfort to me. I, too, have often thought about it. And it is true, as you go about your day, you are either radiating that love of God, or if not, you can be absorbing all the negativity, the blah, blah, blah that's going around. And so what do you want to be? Do you want to be that light, that radiating good and love? Because it is a total and complete armor. In that article, it says, as man cannot at the same time radiate and absorb, by consistently sending forth thoughts of love, life, and truth, whenever a delusion or their opposites presents themselves, he may have a veritable armor against fears of weakness of every description. And so keep prepared for and guard against attacks from every direction. This idea will bear much contemplation, growing and amplifying with application. So when attack seems to approach, by immediately reversing the condition of mind and mentally inquiring of self, am I radiating good or am I absorbing evil? And putting that thought into action by addressing the counteracting thought of spirit to whatever seems to be attacking you from mortal mind, you will set yourself free from bondage and render yourself the medium of demonstration for those